At 11:40 p.m. on April 14, 1912, the Titanic does not hit head-on. It scrapes along the ice and the sound arrives like a long, ugly scratch traveling the length of the hull. The ship keeps moving forward. Down below, seawater begins slipping into the lowest levels with almost no commotion. From here, we rebuild the night minute by minute, every space, every decision, from the first technical warning to the final collapse. If you want this timeline with real precision, hit like and subscribe. Minutes after the scrape, the bridge tries to translate what the hull just felt without lighting a fuse of panic. Officers scan the sea. The Titanic still answers the helm, like this was nothing more than a scare. Below, inspections begin. Lantern beams sweep across riveted plates, and the first thin sheet of water appears, running low across the deck. Watertight doors move to readiness. Messengers start moving between compartments with short, clipped reports. Up on the upper decks, people keep strolling. The Atlantic stays calm, and that calm makes the danger harder to see. As reports climb upward, the situation stops being an inconvenience and becomes constant measurement. In the lower levels, water advances steadily, finding seams, stepping over thresholds, widening its reach. Teams check valves, pumps, and door indicators. The work is pure procedure. Observe, record, activate, compare compartment to compartment. Higher up, brightly lit corridors still look normal. Passengers pass by. Stewards redirect small movements without making it a scene. On the bridge, information is gathered and weighed, trying to understand the scale of damage without turning it into drama. Every minute passes with the ship still moving, while the world beneath it changes. Around midnight, Thomas Andrews starts matching eyewitness reports to the ship's plans, and the tone on the bridge turns more direct. This is not simply water coming in, it is how many compartments have been compromised and whether the hull's design still allows balance. In the Marconi room, operators shift into urgent traffic. Paperwork stays organized. The set stays stable. Down below, crews keep verifying doors and containment routes, buying time one checkpoint at a time. The contrast is sharp. The lounges still glow with light, while the real work happens in wet, metallic corridors. Now the response settles into an emergency routine, even without noise on deck. Pumps are started and watched. Valves are adjusted. Watertight doors are confirmed one by one through their indicators. The bridge receives updates and decides what must be communicated inside the ship and what must be held back to prevent a rush. Stewards move with blankets and cork-life vests, opening access points and shaping the flow. In the wireless room, message logs become a continuous stream. Slips are pinned down, times are marked. The calm sea becomes the silent enemy. It does not demand attention, but the ship is already losing its margin. Roughly 20 minutes after the impact, the operation expands. More hands, more areas. The wireless traffic intensifies, repeating calls, confirming receipts, while the bridge tries to coordinate between the decks and the lower levels. Below, water spreads across wider sections of floor and the goal shifts. It is no longer fix it. It is delay it and protect essential systems as long as possible. On deck, crewmen check davits, lines, and the wooden lifeboat covers, preparing what can be used without pulling unnecessary attention. Passengers begin noticing the movement. Time becomes an explicit factor. As the assessment sharpens, the bridge reinforces readiness and organizes the first stages of evacuation without a dramatic announcement. Andrews moves with the plans and confirms the trend. Water is still rising and future stability is shrinking by the minute. The Marconi operators keep a steady rhythm, tuning adjustments, repetition, constant hands-on work. In technical spaces, the sounds of pumps, valves, and vibration signal continuous effort, not a final solution. On deck, knots and pulleys are checked to prevent jams when boats must be lowered. From the outside, the Titanic still looks whole and brilliantly lit. Inside, it is already operating at the edge. Around 40 minutes in, preparation becomes execution. Covers come off. Lines are rigged. The deck begins receiving a thicker flow of people. Stewards distribute life vests and guide passengers toward the correct access points, trying to prevent bottlenecks at stairways and doorways. The wireless keeps sending and recording because any help out there depends on these signals in the dark. Below, indicators and lantern lights show water accelerating along the floor, forcing retreats and new door activations. Officers coordinate by motion and gesture, not speeches. The night stays calm. The logistics do not. From here, organized evacuation becomes the primary procedure. Crewmen align ropes and blocks to lower boats safely, and the lines become visibly real. In the Marconi room, messages continue in sequence, slips pinned down so they do not slide. In the technical areas, the effort narrows to one objective: keep power, keep usable time. Water takes compartments that cannot be saved. Outside, the Titanic still looks impressive, almost untouchable. That is part of the trap. The appearance of control lingers, even as the technical margin disappears. About an hour after the impact, the boat deck enters a controlled loop. Prepare, load, lower, push away. The crew keeps order to prevent accidents with lines under tension, while freezing air cuts across the deck. Below, water now covers broad lanes of floor. Every pump adjustment buys minutes, not salvation. On the bridge, officers watch progress and the growing list, trying to keep the operation synchronized across the ship. Passengers now feel it more clearly. Something serious is happening, even without long explanations. The Atlantic remains silent, and that silence makes the scene feel unreal. Around 1 a.m., the operation becomes non-stop execution. Lines run, knots are checked, life vests pass hand to hand. The wireless room maintains transmissions and keeps slips organized without pause, squeezing every window of contact. Officers check the davit falls, control the tempo, and prevent snags during lowering. The ship is still lit, but the list is now obvious to anyone walking the deck. If this minute-by-minute reconstruction is helping you understand what really unfolded, like the video and subscribe to follow it all the way to the moment stability finally breaks. The usable time is shrinking, even with a calm sea. Without public fanfare, the deck enters its most intense phase. Less margin, more technical repetition. Around 1:20, officers and crew work like a production line, rechecking lines through the blocks, aligning hooks, controlling descent speed. Stewards keep guiding people upward and tightening life vests, trying to maintain flow without pushing or panic. In the Marconi room, the cadence of signals never stops. Papers are weighted down so they will not slide as the deck tilts. Below, pumps and valves remain active, but water keeps advancing. Outside, the Titanic still looks massive and solid, while cold wind sweeps the deck clean. Near 1:30 a.m., the assessment converges into a practical conclusion. Flooding has moved beyond what doors and pumps can hold back in the long run. Andrews checks compartment by compartment, matching reports to the plans, while the bridge maintains coordination above. Evacuation must continue steadily because every delay increases the chance of snags, slips, and falls. The Marconi operators keep trying for contact, repeating messages, logging times, no break in rhythm. In the lower levels, wet floors and flowing water force retreats, and door indicators are checked fast. On deck, the wind bites harder, and the tilt begins to change how people walk. Around 1:40, it becomes more boats, more movement, and less stability. Officers control lines and spacing inside each boat to prevent overload and chaotic boarding. Crewmen feed ropes carefully through the pulleys. A jam now costs precious minutes. In the wireless room, hands alternate between tuning and transmitting, sending distress again and again into the night. Below, containment becomes an effort to keep essential systems running and routes open while the water rises. Music can still exist as distant diegetic sound somewhere far inside the ship, but the image is a machine-like operation, mechanical, urgent, unforgiving. Around 1:50, physical signals become harder to ignore. Small objects begin to creep. People hold railings more often. The bridge insists on keeping evacuation organized while there is still light and some control of flow. In technical spaces, humidity and vibration increase. Gauges and valves become constant reference points. On deck, a boat reaches the water and must be pulled away from the hull so it does not slam into the side. Boat hooks and lines do that work with precision. Then a rocket cuts the sky. No answer appears right away. Calm sea. Listing ship. That contrast is what brands the moment into memory. Just after 2 a.m., time becomes visibly heavy. Officers check fall lines and descent speed to prevent a boat from swinging into the ship's side. Below, certain corridors can no longer be held. Water takes the floor and forces withdrawal to higher levels. The wireless room keeps transmitting, but now the operators work with vibration and an obvious tilt, pinning papers down and steadying equipment so contact is not lost. On deck, small details give the truth away. Shorter steps, more hands on railings, slower movement. The Titanic continues sinking by the bow, and the stern begins to rise against the sky. Between 2:05 and 2:10, the feeling on deck changes. The cold is the same, the stability is not. Crewmen recheck knots, hooks, and blocks one last time, because any failure now becomes immediate danger. In technical spaces, some controls are shut and the work becomes a controlled retreat, keeping routes open. The bridge watches the bow drop and tries to preserve overall coordination with almost no margin left. In the wireless room, the persistence continues, but signs suggest the station may have to be abandoned at any moment. On the horizon, nothing stands out, only darkness, calm water, and the accelerating operation on board. Around 2:10, there are fewer options and almost no time to execute them cleanly. On deck, officers keep lines running freely through the blocks and maintain the lowering rhythm without jams. The entry points to the boat deck become critical. Stewards can still hand out life vests and direct people, but space is shrinking. The list grows and forces everyone to cling to railings and structures as constant support. Fourth Officer Boxhall keeps preparing rockets to signal into the dark, even without immediate response. The image should alternate between technical close-ups and wide views, showing the ship's remaining grandeur as control narrows to a thin, slipping edge. Near 2:15, the Marconi room is still transmitting in sequence, slips held down with weights so they do not slide as the deck tilts. Andrews moves between command areas and the boat deck, confirming what the numbers already say. Flooding has surpassed what the design can tolerate for much longer. On deck, attention shifts to collapsible boats, which require releasing straps, unfolding canvas, and positioning them correctly at the rail. Crewmen clear lines to keep the boat from catching on a cleat or metal fittings. The bridge can feel the ship working. Wood, metal, and vibration become constant signals. The sea stays calm. The stability on board does not. Around 2:20, walking the deck feels like climbing a never-ending ramp. The flow of people increases and must be spread out to avoid choke points at doors and stairs. Lightoller and his team drag a collapsible toward the side while others check lines and handholds. In the wireless room, Jack Phillips tries to use every remaining minute, tuning and transmitting without pause. Harold Bride pins down papers and tools, knowing a single fall could end the work. The cutting wind and the tilt reshape everything. Every step demands care. Every technical action must be fast and correct. The Titanic is still here, but its balance is no longer normal. Around 2:25 a.m., the sound of water dominates the lower spaces, and the bow is so low that the height of the deck becomes a terrifying reference. Captain Smith looks forward, then turns back into the bridge. Andrews confirms, by signs and by the plans, that the choices have narrowed to almost nothing. On deck, a deep groan runs through the ship and makes fittings tremble. This is not effect. It is structure under load. The lights waver. Darkness grows, making organization harder. Evacuation stops being a procedure and becomes movement to avoid being trapped where the ship will pinch shut. The sea remains calm. On board, instability is total. Collapse is close. Between 2:27 and 2:30, structural failure begins to impose itself as a physical sequence. Sharp cracks, tremors, progressive loss of light. Railings become lifelines because the angle makes safe movement nearly impossible. The deck becomes more silhouette than detail, with the starry sky as the only stable reference. Below, water roars, and the ship no longer behaves like a single stable body. In the Marconi room, the operators keep working, but everything suggests the station will be abandoned within moments. The bow continues going first, as predicted, while the stern rises toward a steeper and steeper angle. From here, there is no return. Around 2:30, the stern dominates the view, lifted and unstable against the night sky. Sound alternates between the hull's groans and the water dragging everything downward, a constant bass note that keeps growing. There is a brief sensation of pause, then another shift. What remains of the ship tries to find balance. It cannot. Darkness erases fine details, but behavior becomes clear through railing lines, shadows, and the horizon. Each new vibration confirms the structure is being pushed beyond its limit. At this stage, the sequence is mechanical: gravity, weight, water. The Titanic is crossing into rupture and into permanent disappearance. Soon after, the wireless station stops being a priority. Phillips and Bride gather what they can and move to escape because the ship no longer offers stability for continued transmission. On deck, the angle is extreme and motion feels constant even when no one is running. Wind cuts across the deck with nothing to stop it, and the roar of water builds like a wall. Anyone still aboard searches for higher points and grips whatever they can find, trying not to be caught on metal fittings. The stern rises even more, and the ship answers with cracking sounds and a deep, heavy groan. The rupture is near. The surviving lights fail in irregular pulses. Around 2:35, the hull enters a phase of obvious structural failure, strong tremors, repeated cracks, and the sound of metal under tension. Lights flicker and die in steps, leaving the deck almost entirely in silhouette against the sky. The roar of water takes over as the ship shifts angle in a way you can feel, even from a distance. People cling to railings and structures, trying to remain on the highest points. This is not drama, this is physics. The bow has already been taken. The stern is raised beyond what the hull can tolerate. Everything points toward separation and toward the final descent. Between 2:35 and 2:40, the physical climax hits. The hull breaks, energy collapses, darkness takes over almost completely. The bow disappears first. The stern shifts position, then begins its own descent. The deck stops being a continuous reference. It becomes shadow, noise, and motion. Water pulls with force, and what was one ship becomes two masses, behaving differently for a few brief moments. Then the stern goes down as well, and the heavy sound of water replaces everything else. When it is over, the Atlantic becomes the dominant surface again. Vast, freezing, empty. The bright structure that existed minutes earlier is simply gone. After the sinking, what remains is what floats. Debris, cork life vests, lifeboats scattered across the dark. The water is brutal cold, and every movement drains energy. Those in the water try to brace on wood and keep their faces above the surface. Boats row slowly, using short strokes to avoid losing stability, then stop to scan the field around them. Little by little, the sky lightens, revealing the spread of the debris field, patches of timber, objects drifting in silence. Without the ship, the sea seems calm again, like it did in the opening, but now it holds a surface of remnants. Under the growing light, the Atlantic keeps the final evidence of that 1912 night.
This video was an AI-assisted historical reconstruction based on records from the time, created for artistic and narrative purposes.